Following program is intended for listeners who are blind, have low vision, or another print disability that makes reading, holding a book, or turning a page difficult or impossible. The content is copyrighted by USA Today. For more information, please visit us on the web at nfradioreading.org. The Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service now presents a reading of articles and features from USA Today for the first day of June 2026. Your readers today are Tom Scanlon and
David Hayes.
As always, we start with page 1 of USA Today, and our first article is titled California Governor Contest Tightens. The authors are Terry Collins, Danielle Segura, and Philip M. Bailey. California elections can be, complicated. Voters are seeing 61 gubernatorial candidates on their ballots in the state's crowded, closely watched, nonpartisan jungle primary on June 2nd. That's tomorrow. The two leading vote-getters, regardless of party affiliation, will advance to the general election in November. Republican Steve Hilton, a former Fox News contributor endorsed by President Donald Trump, seems likely to make the cut based on polls. But the Democrats' larger number of candidates has created more ambiguity about which one is most likely to break into the top two. The leading contenders are former Health and Human Services Secretary Xavier Becerra and billionaire entrepreneur and climate activist Tom Steyer. If one of them faces Hilton this fall, he would be the heavy favorite to lead the nation's most populous and blue state. Though Hilton has led many polls for months, according to a Public Policy Institute of California poll released May 27th, Becerra is now leading the field with 23%, followed by Hilton at 20% and Steyer at third with 15%. The University of California Berkeley Institute of Governmental Studies poll of likely voters released May 29th has Becerra at 25%, Hilton at 21%, Steyer with a striking distance at 19%, raising the slight possibility of two Democrats making it to the general election if Steyer surpasses Hilton. Also, about 1 in 4 voters are still undecided, according to polls, further adding to the intrigue. I think Steyer is more than a shot of winning a spot, said Paul Mitchell, Vice President of Political Data, Inc., a Sacramento-based bipartisan voter data firm. I don't think this race is over by any stretch. Steyer's nipping at their heels, but he might not get enough votes to push through, said David McCuen, a political science professor at Sonoma State University. With Governor Gavin Newsom termed out in January after 8 years in office, Becerra could be California's first elected Latino governor in more than a century. Hilton could be the state's first Republican governor since Arnold Schwarzenegger from 2003 to 2011. Yet, traditionally low voter turnout is even lower this year than in previous primaries, Mitchell said. The California electorate has not embraced this race, so this could be a vote for the lesser of two evils, said Brian Sobel, a veteran political analyst in the San Francisco Bay Area. This is a big field, and voters are not really thrilled with anybody. Whoever comes from California as future governor will manage a state with a roughly $4 trillion economy, the world's fourth largest. He'll also take over the role of managing California's multi-billion-dollar debt, Medicaid access amid federal spending cuts, high housing costs and homelessness, and the persistent crisis of wildfire prevention and recovery. 1 in 8 Americans live in California. Nearly half whose registered voters are Democrats. A quarter of the residents identify as Republican. Remaining voters call themselves independent or have, quote, no party preference, end quote, the Public Policy Institute of California said. California's national political influence is enormous. Presidents Ronald Reagan and Richard Nixon both came from there, as did the 2024 Democratic presidential nominee, former Vice President Kamala Harris. Harris and Newsom are the presumptive leading contenders for the 2028 Democratic nomination, according to polls and pundits. Former House Speaker Nancy Pelosi also hails from San Francisco. Despite their influence, none of the current national big names have endorsed anyone for governor. Democratic state leaders, including California Democratic Party Chair Rusty Hicks, worried for months that a split field on their side would lead to an all-Republican general election. But they're breathing easier as recent polls show Becerra emerging after former U.S. Representative Eric Swalwell departed from the race in April over allegations of sexual assault and misconduct, which he denies. We're clearly in a different place today than we were 2 months ago. Some candidates are surging and consolidating, others are following behind, Hicks told reporters after the last Democratic Party-sponsored poll was released May 19th. It shows Hilton ahead of Becerra by just 1%. California primaries traditionally have low voter turnout. Fewer than 40% of the state's 23 million registered voters are expected to participate. Political Data Inc.'s Mike Mitchell told USA Today. Democratic voters, especially women, returning ballots at lower rates compared with the state's last midterm election, 2022, reflecting an uncertainty over their options, Mitchell said. Insight from political data show 44% of the ballots returned through May 27th have come from registered Democrats, compared with 53% the same point 4 years ago. Republicans have accounted for 35% of ballots returned, up from their 26% share in 2022. Mitchell said with so many Democratic gubernatorial candidates, voters are holding on to their ballots longer, hoping to get some signs from top state lawmakers on whom to pick. He compares it to Representative Jim Clyburn's endorsement of Joe Biden before the 2020 South Carolina Democratic primary, which was widely seen as the turning point of the presidential race. Democratic voters here are still waiting for somebody to tell them this is the candidate we're going with. It's what happened in South Carolina in 2020 when Biden became their pick. In California, it's not a question of whether these primary voters will participate in the primary, but who they will pick after this long and tedious campaign. In a series of California gubernatorial debates spanning several weeks, as many as 8 candidates, including low-polling Democratic candidates former Los Angeles Mayor Antonio Villaraigosa and State Superintendent of Public Instruction Tony Thurmond, took the stage, almost requiring a scorecard to keep track. There's no one that you could say really won the debates this year, said Thad Kozer, University of California, San Diego political science advisor. In April, Becerra suddenly became what McCon describes as the Democrat by default after Swalwell's dramatic departure. Becerra's candidacy was flailing and he was polling in single digits. Becerra remained steady, leaned on his experience, and steadily climbed in the polls. The focus on lowering the cost of health care, housing, child care, and utilities, fighting Trump, has capitalized on loyal Democratic voters, Latinos, and even those with no party preference. He's a safe pick, said McCone. Sobel says there's an indifference about Becerra. People feel okay about the guy. They're not over the moon about him. And they don't dislike him. They can't be said about Tom Steyer. Either you like him or you don't. And it's basically the same with Katie Porter. Becerra simply doesn't draw that kind of emotional or visceral response. With California's status as the biggest state in the country, any campaign comes with a high cost, and this year's gubernatorial contest is no different. In terms of spending, Steyer, a former hedge fund manager, is the unquestioned king. He committed more than $1.5 million of his own money, and counting, toward ads across various media platforms, according to media tracking firm Ad Impact. San Jose Mayor Matt Mahan has seen about $22 million from outside groups, including several Silicon Valley tech investors who encouraged him to run. Becerra has also been benefited from outside contributions to the tune of about $13 million. Stayers responded by suggesting voters should pay close attention to corporations supporting Becerra, his chief Democratic rival in the polls. Steyer could be a victim of overexposure, flooding the state with his repetitive barrage of fiery, angry man ads. Maybe Stayer's been too present, even for those who really initially liked his message, until it became, "Okay, Tom, I heard it, I get it." When you see somebody's face every 3 minutes, it's like, "Hey, can you back off a bit?" Sobel does credit Steyer with getting Oscar-winning actress and longtime environmental advocate Jane Fonda to narrate one of his ads to present a softer approach. Otherwise, McEwen, the Sonoma State professor, compares Becerra to a slow-moving tortoise, and Steyer has been the twitchy hare in this race. Steyer's an excellent issue candidate. The organizations, the work he's done in climate and affordability, McEwen said, but he's not a guy who commands the room or works every rubber chicken dinner at every county Democratic feed like Becerra. And that could be the big difference in this race.
The next article is titled "The Pennsylvania Hospital Looks Back in History." That hospital is older than the U.S. It helped shape modern medicine. This article is written by Phaedra Trefan. The cornerstone was set in 1755 with, quote, George II happily reigning, for he sought the happiness of his people, end quote. Now the hospital, older than the nation itself and a part of the University of Pennsylvania's health system, has opened a museum looking back at its history as a pioneer in surgery, education, and innovation. The Pennsylvania Hospital was founded by Dr. Thomas Bond and his friend, one Benjamin Franklin, in 1751. Bond, efficient in private practice, saw many of the city's poor forced to forego medical care because they couldn't afford it. He approached friends and fellow doctors who mostly agreed there was a need, but they balked when Bond asked for money to start a hospital to serve those in need. That's according to Stacy Peebles, the hospital's curator and archivist. The hospital says it's the nation's oldest, although others have claimed similar titles. Quote, Pennsylvania Hospital has only been a hospital. It has always functioned as a medical facility, end quote, Peebles said. He'd seen them in Europe, said Peebles, and he wanted to bring it to America. Bond's solution? Go to the man who was at the time Philadelphia's most respected and most influential thinker, a man who could make things happen, that being Franklin. Helping the poor and preserving their names. Pennsylvania Hospital, though never religiously affiliated, was founded in a city heavily influenced by its Quaker roots. Its mission? To provide free medical care for the poor, white and black, free and enslaved. Quote, but if an enslaved person was treated, their master was responsible to pay for their care, end quote, People explained. Many of the city's poor were illiterate and had no property, so records of their care at Pennsylvania Hospital might be the only record of them that even exists, People said. Bringing that out is something I enjoy most, said Peebles, who has a master's degree in history and experience working for the National Archives. She showed handwritten records of payment by contractors who worked at the hospital including Richard Allen, a formerly enslaved man who bought his freedom and went on to co-found the Free African Society and established Mother Bethel African Methodist Episcopal Church. Surgery, pharmacology, meteorology, and mental health care. One surprising finding amid the museum's collection: a collection of meteorological data kept 3 times a day, every day from 1824 to 1922 in the hospital's apothecary. People said the National Weather Service has even occasionally consulted the data. Pennsylvania hospitals serve the poor as well as those with mental illness, taking an Enlightenment-inspired scientific approach and rejecting ideas common at the time, those being that mental illness was caused by demonic possession or other supernatural phenomena. Doctors knew there was something medically wrong that caused erratic behavior, even if they didn't know precisely what it was, people said. Benjamin Rush, a politician, physician, and signer of the Declaration of Independence, was an early pioneer in treating the mentally ill, insisting, for example, that the cells where they were kept be heated, even though others believed their illness kept them from feeling the effects of their environment. Woo. The hospital's medical library is part of the museum tour as well, with more than 13,000 volumes dating as far back as 1483, from physicians and medical facilities all over the world, and still available to researchers upon request. Its operating theater, the first in the United States, is also open and forms one of the hospital's defining architectural features. Those surgeons in 1804, when it opened, didn't know about things like anesthesia or germs, quote, they'd wash up after surgery, end quote, people said. They did understand the value of teaching the next generation of physicians, as many as 300 of whom could observe operations in the rounded room from 2 or 3 stories above. Today, the operating theater has a life-size virtual interactive operating table that enables visitors to view inside the human body, peel back layers of skin, muscle, blood vessels, and nerves all the way to the skeleton, and even cut cross-sections of organs like the brain. One of people's favorite rooms of the hospital museum, though, is dedicated to perseverance. It's filled with photos and stories of medical professionals from throughout Pennsylvania hospital's history who have gone to war zones and worked in the midst of epidemics from yellow fever to influenza to HIV/AIDS to COVID-19. And finally, quote, I've always been interested in epidemics and how people respond to them, she said. You know, the helpers versus the hoarders. We've seen that all throughout history.
You're listening to a reading of today's USA Today on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. The time is 18 minutes after the hour. Our next article is titled, Do Drivers Hate Cyclists? Nation sees alarming rash of crashes. Bicyclists and drivers have a long, fraught history in the United States, and spring in 2026 shows that sharing the road still isn't going so well. In Florida, court records show a man was charged with attempting murder and other counts in March after police said he fired a gun from his pickup truck at a group of boys riding bikes in the street, striking one in the leg. Southern California, a driver was charged after video showed a blue BMW tailgate bikers riding in a bike lane in Newport Beach, forcing one bicyclist to jump onto a curb to avoid being hit on March 21st. And a man in Georgia was charged with aggravated assault, reckless driving, and other counts after allegedly hitting a group of cyclists with his SUV in April. People have the option that cyclists don't have the right to use the public roads. said Maggie Dito, who advocates for greater safety for cyclists as president of the St. Johns River to Sea Loop Alliance and is a board member of the Florida Bicycle Association. Ardito says the sight of a group of bicyclists can enrage drivers, and in Ardito's experience as a cyclist and a leader of the biking community in Florida, it's been happening more and more. Meanwhile, not all crashes involving bikes and cars are attributed to vehicle drivers' behavior. One crash in Disneyland, Florida, 2025, happened when a bicyclist ran a stop sign, reported the Daytona Beach News Journal, part of the USA Today network, citing Florida Highway Patrol. 38-year-old cyclist was killed in that accident. In an extreme example, in February, police in Santa Ana, California, said a man threw a bicycle at a car in traffic, damaging its hood. Data show a concerning trend in recent years. They've seen a sharp increase in bicycle fatalities among men over the age of 20, according to the Insurance Institute for Highway Safety. Deaths have increased 15% since 1975 and 86% since an all-time low point in 2010. Meanwhile, fatalities have decreased for children. 2024, 1,103 bicyclists died in traffic crashes. The National Highway Traffic Safety Administration data show. So what's going on? Why are drivers and bicyclists seemingly always at odds? For years, road engineers widened streets to allow for a forecast increase in traffic congestion, said Leanne Von Hagen, the executive director of the Alan M. Voorhees Transportation Center at Rutgers University. But wider roads are also an invitation for faster car speeds. Since the pandemic began, overall speeds have increased along with reckless driving. There are also more cyclists on the road these days. People for Bike Study found more Americans rode in 2024 than at any time in the previous decade. And after a sudden drop-off of driving congestion at the start of the pandemic, driving is mostly rebounded. With more bikes and vehicles sharing the road, there are more chances for heated, sometimes deadly encounters. People are adopting bicycling more, which is healthy and helps the environment, helps us get to lower energy costs. It's a lot less expensive to ride your bike today than it is to fill your gas tank. And we really haven't created actual facilities for people to bicycle in. The documented deaths don't represent all bike-car collisions. There's no one source to compile data on such collisions nationwide, especially considering cases that don't lead to death or serious injury, or instances of conflict or road rage that don't include a crash, Van Hagen said. The NHTSA data show there have been increases in bicycle fatalities and traffic crashes since the start of the COVID pandemic. Pedestrian fatalities have also increased, said Hannah Youns, senior research specialist at Rutgers Transportation Center. Most vehicle drivers can become angry at bikers when they feel the cyclists have breached their expectations on the road, said Dwight Hennessy, chair and professor of psychology at Buffalo State University. Bikes are inherently much slower than cars, and car drivers claim to go as fast as the road conditions will allow. While car drivers may see bikes as in their way, bicyclists are concerned for their safety, may regard drivers as getting too close, as driving like a maniac on the road and not paying attention to me, he said. I don't think either side really thinks about the other's perspective. Hennessy, who specializes in the psychology of traffic and road rage, told USA Today. People are more prone to road rage or more easily triggered than others by their experiences on the road, may tend to perceive incidents, whether accidental or not, as personal slights. Bikers can be just as guilty of aggressive behavior or dangerous driving, said Hennessy, who's a frequent cyclist himself. There are some cyclists who are antagonistic toward drivers, he said. Cyclists might think a driver is coming up too close to them because they're a jerk, he said. In their mind, how do you deal with a jerk? Well, you just piss them off even more. Maybe you teach them a lesson. A group of bicyclists was riding together in DeLand, Florida, when a pickup truck came unexpectedly into their lane, plowing them down and injuring multiple riders on May 9th. States Highway Patrol said in a report that the driver of the 2015 Chevy Silverado involved in the crash was asleep or fatigued at the wheel. Local station WESH published footage showing the truck was coming toward the cyclist from the opposite direction. Silverado had at least 7 cyclists of the group of 13, the report said. It also hit an SUV, according to reporting from the Daytona Beach News Journal. 3 of the riders were seriously injured, according to news reports, including Ryan Flesh, who's beloved manager at JC's Bike Shop in DeLand. Ardito is a close friend of Flesh's. Photos of the crash aftermath shared on social media and by local news outlets showed several damaged bikes and riders lying on the ground. Flesh sustained a broken ankle and severely injured fingers and one hand. It's not clear whether he'll regain full function of his hand, potentially devastating injury for his profession, Ardito said. This should not have happened to him, she said. The group was following traffic laws and riding cautiously, but cyclists are much more vulnerable to injury or death out in the open compared with a driver of a vehicle. Even the most cautious bike riders are at risk. Ardito said inattentive or distracted drivers are a serious hazard for cyclists trying to share the road, regardless of whether there are bike lanes. Drivers distracted on cell phones are prone to drift into a bike lane. Problem, she says, is on the rise. One of the most dangerous places for a bicyclist is at an intersection. Returning vehicles pose an extra hazard when they don't check for cyclists coming, Jans and Van Hagen said. There are situations where even in the presence of a dedicated bike lane, unless it's protected by barriers, may still be the safest for a cyclist to ride in the road, Van Hagen said. Bike lanes can be risky if they're too narrow, and it's all too easy for a car to drift or swipe a rider with a side mirror, she said. Bike lanes tend to be where people illegally park, where garbage cans or accumulating fall leaves pile up. Team at Rutgers studied a driver and cyclist behavior before and after implementation of a temporary bike lane in New Jersey. Men are generally more likely than women to ride in the street, while women are more likely to ride on the sidewalk, Young said. When there's a protected lane with physical barriers or a parking lane between a bike lane and a car traffic, there's more universal. People who are more risk averse will use it instead of the sidewalks. Ardito is retired, said she's hypervigilant about safety while cycling and wears high visibility gear. She still chooses to get around by bike as much as she can and deliberately moved to a neighborhood where she could access most of her essentials that way. When she and her husband go on vacation, they try to visit bike-friendly places like the Netherlands. She hopes to educate drivers that cyclists have just as much right to the road as cars, while also informing cyclists of how to safely ride and obey all the rules. And lastly, she says, recognize that everybody is important to somebody, Ardito said in a message to drivers.
You are listening to a reading of today's USA Today on the Naver Frontier Reading Service. The time is 12:29. We will now move to the money section. The title of the first article is Experts Say All Real Estate is Local Again. There appears to be no national market anymore. The article is submitted by Andrea Wickweir. Ongoing tech layoffs, global instability, and mortgage rates stuck stubbornly in the high sixes are leaving many Seattle home sellers and buyers on the sidelines this year. In Savannah, Georgia, meanwhile, a big boom of commerce, including a new Hyundai plant, has so many people moving into the area that buyers are once again facing bidding wars. So what's the common theme? When real estate agents around the country describe housing market conditions where they are, their stories are increasingly unique to their particular areas. It's a big shift, a return to the all real estate is local reality that held true up until the subprime bubble of the early aughts made everyone followers of a national housing market narrative. Quote, "There is no national market anymore at all," end quote, said Selma Hepp, chief economist for real estate data firm Cotality. "It's about locality, right? It's sort of slow and steady on the national level, but there's a lot going on when you look under the hood." Fractured by regions. In a recent report, Hepp wrote that, quote, "The national trend hides a complex and increasingly fractured regional landscape." Official data supports that view. In February, the National Association of Realtors reported a jump in sales of existing homes. In March, it was followed by a big decline, and in April, there was almost no change at all. Under the hood in Seattle, however, Jenny Sandmeyer, a managing broker with Windmere, describes a stagnant market. Agents are having to coach sellers to work harder at prepping their homes, she said, and to get over any frustration they may feel about likely missing the top of the market a few years ago. But while buyers overall may be benefiting from a slight increase in supply, Sandmeyer added, those in the middle and lower income categories are still stretching to afford homes, if not dropping out of the search altogether. The description of the boom in Savannah comes from Chris Canavan with Exclusive Buyers Realty. Automakers are expanding their operations there, Canavan said. Traffic through the Port of Savannah is increasing, and the Southeast is becoming a national hub for logistics. That brings in lots of new buyers, and it's also making existing homeowners more comfortable about listing for sale, he said. Tony Moss, founder of housing consultancy Eurocatalyst, was one of the early analysts who called the subprime bubble decades ago. Moss agrees that trends in globalization and housing are reverting from the national and international stage to the local level. Buyers and investors will increasingly have to weigh not just local job markets or weather or amenities, but also how safe those areas may be from natural disasters and regional disruptions. As the federal government increasingly cedes disaster relief to states and localities, Moss thinks that the burden of managing risk is incrementally moving local to regional and statewide levels and to city and community levels, she told the USA Today. In the same way that we see the acceleration of income inequality among individuals, demographic groups, and race, we are going to see even greater inequality based on location, she said. Today, economic survival requires flexibility and, more importantly, mobility. Just right or stalemate. If Savannah is running hot and Seattle a bit cold, South Florida might be, quote, just right. In fact, that's how Jeff Lichtenstein, the owner and broker of Ecofine Properties, was thinking about his markup up until the Iran war broke out. It was kind of like the porridge and the three little bears, Lichtenstein said, and it's like, what could go wrong? And then we all discovered the Strait of Hormuz. And finally, a market in perfect equilibrium still has its challenges, Lichtenstein said. Often both buyers and sellers are convinced their side has the advantage, making it harder to get deals done. When all the local markets get averaged together, that's almost how it looks to Selma Hepp at the national level.
This next article is titled More Young Couples Have Separate Bank Accounts. The author is Rachel Barber. Young Americans are embracing financial independence, even if that means keeping money separate from their spouses or partner. New research from Fidelity finds a large share of Gen Z and millennials are holding on to their individual bank accounts compared with Gen X and baby boomers. A survey of more than 3,000 married or partnered couples who have been together for 3 or 4 more years found 34% of Gen Z, 26% of millennial couples keep their money in completely separate accounts, compared with 19% of Gen X and 15% of boomers. A mixed approach also seems to be growing in popularity, but 42% of millennial couples are storing money in both individual and joint accounts, compared with about 1 in 3 Gen X and boomer couples. Financial experts are wary of this trend, believing separate accounts opens the door to confusion, extended timelines for reaching shared goals, and financial infidelity. One reason maybe more women are working today than when many boomers got together in the 1960s and 70s. Before the Equal Credit Opportunity Act of 1974, women were routinely required to have a male cosigner before opening an account. Still today, 46% of women say they feel financially dependent, compared with 16% of men, the survey found. People are also getting married later in life, meaning they have more time to build up their net worth before tying the knot. At the end of the day, what we're facing is the emotional barrier of, what if this person doesn't turn out to be who I thought they were? Jade Warshaw, financial coach and co-host of The Ramsey Show, said, adding, as couples get married later in life, they've likely witnessed people around them getting divorced begin to prepare for the worst instead of expecting the best. The rise in student loans also has made combined financing more complicated, as some partners want to tackle their debt alone. Jason Fannin, a certified financial planner and senior partner of Cornerstone Financial Services, said he's seen a couple hold off on combining finances based on one partner would have otherwise not qualified for student loan forgiveness. Fallon said the great wealth transfer, which is expected to move trillions of dollars that now belong to older Americans into the hands of their children over the next 2 decades, may also be a reason young couples choose to handle finances separately. If someone's bringing $500,000 and they're in their late 20s to a relationship, perhaps the other person doesn't have much, I can see how that becomes more of an issue, Fannin, age 49, said. While among older generations, a lot of people that I know married their high school girlfriend, boyfriend, what have you, and no one had any money. There are not many prenups I was aware of. But today, prenups are on the rise. All those Fidelities surveyed, 13% said they had a formal or informal prenuptial agreement with their spouse, compared with 29% of Gen Z. The other factor contributing to couples keeping their accounts separate may be more simple. It's not always fun to talk finances. Among respondents, 44% said they avoid talking about money because they are concerned it will start an argument. 31% said they don't want to worry their partner. 21% they fear being judged or lectured. Now, talking can lead to problems, but a quarter of respondents admitted hiding a financial secret from their partner, and 68% said they didn't have a full picture of their partner's finances till after they moved in together. Warshaw advises couples to have the money talk sooner rather than later. They're not always the most pleasant, but you don't have to unpack everything in one conversation, Warshaw said. You need to have those so that you know who this person is financially and how they view you. because everybody has gender roles baked in the way they were raised and what they expect. Fallon says in some circumstances, a couple choosing to maintain separate accounts can make sense. He generally wouldn't recommend it, though. He said if couples have a hard time keeping track of separate accounts, it can lead to later missed payments, particularly if the two people are unable to hold each other accountable. Those missed payments can lead to lower credit scores, make borrowing money more difficult in the future. Similarly, he said managing money separately can also make it harder for a couple to achieve financial goals, like buying a home or paying down debt, especially if they aren't clued in to the other partner's savings and spending habits. Well, there's just no getting around that, Warshaw said. As long as the people with the two incomes are on the same page mentally, you're going to go light years faster. So you should not only ask for help from your spouse, but expect help from your spouse. If a couple insists on keeping separate accounts, Fenner recommends they be sure to list the other as beneficiary. Otherwise, he said, if one partner becomes incapacitated or dies, the other may not be able to access the funds. That's when attorneys and probate enter the picture. It can be both expensive and emotionally taxing at a time when someone is grieving. Fenner said having separate accounts also increases possibility of financial infidelity. When one partner is not forthcoming about where money's going, sometimes that may be intentional. He said one woman in a couple he advised had a separate account for money she intends to spend on getting her hair and nails done, and they like it that way. The woman was, I'm so glad because I don't want him to know how much I spend on that stuff either. So there's a kind of this agreement, Fallon says, adding that a lighthearted example, but that financial infidelity often is a way to cover up spending on vices. That's the case of it working out, but I've seen this also go sideways. And lastly, to avoid the worst case scenario, Fannin recommends couples establishing monthly amount going to each individual spending account. Generally agree where that money will go and not deviate from the plan. It's just extra, Fallon said. Adding retirement contributions and bill payments should be ideally made from a joint account rather than individual accounts. We're not really dependent on either one for long-term planning success.
You are listening to a reading of articles from USA Today for the 21st of June. You are listening on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. The time now is 42 minutes after the hour. The next article is also from the money section. It is titled On the Brink. Harder than landing a job is holding on to one you already have. The article is by Rachel Barber. One of the few things more stressful than looking for a job in 2026 may be trying to hold on to one, new research suggests. After a year of weak growth, the labor market has shown some signs of picking up steam. The Labor Department estimated U.S. employers added 115,000 jobs in April and 185,000 jobs in March. But month after month, hiring remains concentrated in certain sectors like healthcare and social assistance. Workers outside those industries have clung to their jobs, fearing they won't be able to find another amid growing AI adoption, waves of layoffs, and a general sense of economic uncertainty that may prompt employers to scale back hiring. Attempting to secure a job in this environment can feel grueling. A Resume Genius report detailing the results of a survey of 1,000 job seekers conducted by Pollfish found 49% of those looking for work say the search has negatively impacted their mental health. But workers staying in roles they don't enjoy also can come at a cost to their well-being. A monster report breaking down the findings of a survey of 1,000 employed U.S. workers also conducted by Pollfish, found 59% say their job negatively affects their mental health at least monthly. Some Americans are impacted by both. They are afraid of being laid off from a job they dislike, and they are also worried about their prospects in today's job market. Joanne, 55, of Pennsylvania, who wanted her last name withheld over fears it would hurt her ability to land a new job, has been laid off 4 times over the past 3 decades and is concerned that it could happen again as the company she works for adopts AI tools. She's heard whispers in her department could be dissolved by next year. I've been in different states. I've used recruiters. I've used resume writers. I've been to headhunters, more headhunters than I can tell you. And the jobs that they keep sending me that you qualify for are now $14 an hour if I'm lucky, she said, adding she surprised her experience in IT, tech, insurance, and criminal law wouldn't make her more valuable to an employer. Quote, $14 an hour is not paying my bills. How is job stress affecting the workers? The Monster survey found 46% of workers reported experiencing burnout. Employees said the factor contributing most to their stress is increased workload or understaffing, following by poor management, struggles with work-life balance, and workplace conflict or drama. About a quarter of respondents said stagnant pay and fear of layoffs also contributed. Quote, the expectation is potentially, while you're not going to increase headcount, we not only expect you to continue to do your job and do it well, we're now going to give you 30% more of the workload and at the same rate, end quote, Monster career expert Vicky Salami said, adding workers are taking on increased responsibility after their co-workers are laid off. Although the national quits rate is relatively low, hovering around 2%, Salami said employers shouldn't see high retention as a sign that their workers are happy. She added the report found 71% of workers admitted to staying in a job they knew was, quote, toxic, end quote. If you have an unhappy workforce, they're not ultimately going to help your bottom line, Salami said, adding that worker burnout can lead to mistakes and a decrease in productivity if companies don't act. What is stressing out the job seekers? The grass isn't always greener on the other side. The Resume Genius report found nearly half of job seekers say the search has negatively affected their mental health, with 55% frustrated by receiving no response after applying, 44% upset by not hearing back after interviewing, and 24% frustrated by automated or AI-generated rejection messages. Lisa Countryman Quos, a national workforce expert at JVS, a professional training and coaching nonprofit, said job seekers who have been in the professional world for more than a few years are experiencing a pendulum shift. The period in 2021 and 2022 when workers voluntarily quit their jobs, known as the Great Resignation, is over. Return to office mandates are back, and competition isn't only coming from other workers. A whopping 80% of job seekers surveyed said they were worried AI will replace jobs in their field. Not only do workers not have power, a lot of apparent benefits are being rolled back, Countryman said. Additionally, now the promise of what kind of opportunities might be available to you in sort of a broad sense is vastly darkened. What to do if you feel stuck in your job? Salemi said workers experiencing burnout should first seek to understand whether their job is in fact to blame for their deteriorating mental health. On a Sunday night, do you get that pit in the stomach feeling? She said, adding workers may ask themselves if they fear being yelled at, their work going unrecognized, their workload being unmanageable for one reason. they are unpaid and worry about the response they would receive if they asked to take a mental health day? For those who answer yes to those questions, she advises them to identify the underlying reason. If it's a problem with their boss, she said workers may attempt to switch departments or roles within their company. If it's an overall company culture issue, it may be time to update their resume, she said, adding it's best to have a backup plan or solid savings cushion in place before quitting. What do you do if you feel stressed in a job search? Career experts recommend job seekers struggling with their search cultivate community, whether that be connecting with people in similar situations or a nonprofit focused on helping people navigate the job market. There are no-cost training programs that you can tap into, Countryman said. Tap into the resources that are available and tap into social supports to ensure that you maintain the energy and the motivation to move successfully through the process. She and Salemi both recommend seeking out professional counseling if the search is seriously impacting a job seeker's mental health. Simple things like recognizing their situation is temporary and doing physical movement, including yoga and meditation, can help too. Side hustles and seasonal work can provide income streams to help bridge the gap between full-time positions, she added. How to talk to your boss about your mental health. Joanne, who has complex post-traumatic stress disorder, says she would not feel comfortable sharing her diagnosis with her current employer. She asked a former employer for accommodations in the past and said she was denied because she was seen as too high functioning. PTSD has a lot of stigma, and I do not fit the profile of someone who has that, Joanne said, adding many people associate with combat veterans or mass shooter incidents, although her trauma stems from her childhood. I don't want that to affect whether or not they want to keep me. She's not alone. Of those surveyed by Monster, 37% said they can't be honest about their mental health at work without facing negative consequences. Salami suggests workers carefully frame the conversation with their boss. She said rather than pointing to burnout, workers should focus on how they've mastered their current responsibilities and want to pivot to another role that will offer more learning opportunities. Make it more role-centric and less about, oh my gosh, this job is killing me, especially for the same employer and even for a new employer, Salami said. Having a clear picture of your own skills, preferences, and opportunities for growth, that is a really good grounding to go into any conversation with your manager. And finally, you can get the outcome without necessarily having the conversation be directly about your mental health, Countryman said. Open the conversation in ways that are clearly a benefit to you, but also a benefit to the company. Then your manager is going to be more open to explorations.
This last article is titled E. Jean Carroll Lawsuits Against Trump Focus of New DOJ Criminal Probe. The department is looking at nonprofit funding. The author is Josh Meyer. Dateline Washington. The Justice Department has opened a criminal investigation into people involved in the civil lawsuits brought against President Donald Trump by writer E. Jean Carroll, who alleges that the real estate mogul sexually abused her in a Manhattan department store 30 years ago. A source familiar with the probe told USA Today. The source confirmed the investigation's existence to USA Today on May 28th, saying the primary objective of the investigation is a nonprofit organization affiliated with billionaire Democratic donor Reid Hoffman, who helped indirectly finance Carroll's legal costs and expenses in her long-running lawsuits against Trump. A federal civil jury ruled in January 2024 that Trump must pay the prominent columnist $83.3 million for defaming her in 2019, when he denied her allegations of sexual assault and said people should pay dearly for such false accusations. Another jury found that Trump owed Carroll at least $5 million. DOJ investigation comes as Trump is running out of options to avoid paying as much as $88 million in damages plus interest. The Supreme Court is currently considering whether to take up at least one of Trump's appeals. Multiple media outlets report that the DOJ probe targets Carroll herself for allegedly making false statements under oath during testimony connected to the two civil lawsuits she won against Trump. During civil trials, the former LA Magazine columnist said she received no outside funding for her lawsuit, but her lawyers later acknowledged that Hoffman had paid some of her legal bills. CNN first reported the existence of the probe, with later reporting by the New York Times, Reuters, ABC News, and other outlets. Hoffman, a co-founder of LinkedIn, provided funding through his Chicago-based nonprofit American Future Republic, according to court documents filed in 2023. He is listed as president, chair, and director in American Future Republic's tax filings for 2024. Sources described the investigation based out of the Justice Department U.S. Attorney's Office in Chicago as very fluid, ongoing, and said that while it does not currently focus on Carroll, it could ultimately lead to her. Source spoke on the condition of anonymity because they're not authorized to publicly comment. Justice Department said in a statement to USA Today that it does not comment on ongoing investigations. No criminal charges have been filed, and the existence of an investigation does not necessarily mean prosecutors will ultimately bring a case. The law firm of Carroll's lawyer in these cases, Roberta Kaplan, told USA Today in a statement that Kaplan, quote, cannot comment at this time beyond what's already in the public record, end quote. But the firm said that Trump has already raised the issue of making false statements in court and lost. In a December 30th, 2024 decision affirming a $5 million unanimous jury verdict against Trump, the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Second Circuit rejected Trump's argument that his team had found proof that Carroll had knowingly lied about the funding from Hoffman's group during her deposition. You're listening to a reading of articles from USA Today for the first day of June on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. We'll return for more readings after this short break. Your readers today are Thomas Scanlon and
David Hayes.
If you're listening to this publication online, you're probably using our website, a podcast player like Spotify or iTunes, a streaming service like Siro, or a smart speaker. Did you know that we now have a dedicated app that can be downloaded to any mobile device, like a smartphone or tablet, for free? App users can conveniently access our live stream and any episode of our podcast easier than ever. To download the app, just type NFRRS in the search window in the Apple App Store or in the Google Play Store. Contact us anytime if you have any questions by calling 716-821-5555, extension 5. Thank you.
We'll continue now with our reading of articles from today's issue of USA Today dated June 1st. Your readers are David Hayes
and Tom Scanlon.
The first article will be from the sports section. It's titled, Union Says Major League Baseball Owners Hurl an Early Hardball. The story is by Bob Nightingale. The Major League Baseball Players Association braced their players for years this would be coming. And there it was, May 28th, presented in black and white. Major League Baseball's first official salary cap proposed since 1994. And the reaction? Pure, unadulterated disgust. The 200-page proposal was worse than the Major League Baseball Players Association ever anticipated after submitting its initial proposal a day earlier. Quote, yesterday, the MLBPA presented a comprehensive package of proposals designed to improve compensation for players at all levels and to incentivize and reward competition on the field, unquote, interim union chief Bruce Meyer said in a statement. Quote, the owners responded today with a demand for a salary cap system, something generations of players have fought against. The last time the owners made such an explicit push for a cap, over 30 years ago, it led to the longest work stoppage in Major League Baseball history. For generations, our members have fought against cap systems because they harm players at all levels, erode or eliminate contractual guarantees, and pit player against player, and lead to more work stoppages, not less, and get worse for players over time. In other words, Major League Baseball's proposal was a complete non-starter. The union anticipated that Major League Baseball would offer to significantly raise the minimum salary, maybe not to $1.5 million as they were seeking in 2027, but at least increased from $780,000. They expected free agency to possibly be lowered from 6 years to 5 years, as they desire, for players 30 years or older. They thought that the salary arbitration pool would be expanded. No, no, and no. There was nothing well, at least in this proposal. Major League Baseball proposed a $245.3 million salary cap, which would cause 8 teams to lower their payroll and in return offered a $171 million salary floor, which would cause 12 teams to increase their payroll. The players would immediately gain $38 million in return. Sorry, the union isn't buying it. The cap and floor would be significantly lowered, the union believes, when benefits and amateur signings are included. It brought back memories of their collective bargaining talks in 2021 when Major League Baseball offered a luxury tax system beginning at $180 million, with also a salary floor at $100 million. It was flatly rejected by the union, and Major League Baseball implemented a lockout that lasted 99 days. This current proposal was rejected by the time the union lawyers walked out of the door. They will talk again perhaps in a few weeks, with meetings occurring more frequently later in the fall. But barring a more stunning surprise than the Colorado Rockies winning the National League West, there will be no agreement when the clock strikes midnight on December 1st. Major League Baseball will impose a lockout. The start of spring training will be delayed and perhaps games will be missed. Major League Baseball realizes that the influx of new owners showing more interest in acquiring real estate holdings than their actual team, this is their best and perhaps last chance to secure a salary cap. If it doesn't happen now, it never will. So Major League Baseball could keep the lockout going into mid-April, forcing the players to miss a paycheck and see if they blink. If the players stay strong, then Major League Baseball must decide how long it is willing to keep the game shut down and how many more missed paychecks will lead to any softening of the union's stance. In the meantime, there will be plenty of rhetoric. Major League Baseball is telling the players if they don't agree to a salary cap, they won't come close to getting their fair share of the financial pie and are offering 50% of all baseball revenue. Major League Baseball says the players are costing themselves money under the current system. Payrolls increased by 149% since 2003, Major League Baseball says, while Major League Baseball's revenue has increased by 247%. In fact, Major League Baseball says the players' share has actually declined in the last 4 collective bargaining agreements. The union argues that if it agreed to Major League Baseball's proposal, the players would receive less money than they are getting now, worried about league-wide escrows that could potentially force them to return money once revenue is calculated. Major League Baseball also says the middle class is getting squeezed, with its data showing that 10% of its highest paid players receive 60% of the total payroll, compared to 51% in the NFL, 41% in the NBA, and 31% in the NHL. The biggest issue we need to solve next to continue to grow the game off the field is fixing the payroll disparity unseen in any other major U.S. sport, Major League Baseball spokesperson Glenn Kaplan said. Ultimately, the game is about hope and competition, and too many fans in too many markets have too little hope their team has a fair chance to win. Fans overwhelmingly support a salary cap and floor like in the other leagues, but they don't believe a $446 million spending cap from top to bottom is a fair fight. Our salary cap and floor proposal levels the playing field while sharing baseball revenue with the players 50-50 as we grow the game. The union calls it a cop-out, arguing that competitive balance isn't a problem considering that small market clubs like the Milwaukee Brewers, Tampa Bay Rays, and Cleveland Guardians are currently leading their respective divisions, with the Brewers winning and Major League Baseball best 97 games last season. Caps don't lower ticket prices for fans, eliminate tanking, or ensure teams are run with equal competence, Meyer said. They suffocate competition by offering owners an all-purpose excuse for inaction and mediocrity. Baseball is experiencing unprecedented momentum, and owners are enjoying record viewership, revenues, and franchise values. Billionaire owners are not seeking to cap their profits or asset values, only player salaries. This isn't out of generosity or a desire to protect the game's well-being. It's a play to control costs, increase profits, and maximize franchise values, all at the expense of players, past, present, and future. And finally, we'll continue our review of the owner's proposal and stand ready to negotiate system improvements that benefits players and fans alike. In other words, let baseball's labor war proceed with a whole lot of arguments, rhetoric, and hostility coming to a ballpark near you. That would be a doozy.
This next article is about the NBA playoff finals. Wembley propels Spurs to NBA finals. The author is Lorenzo Reyes. For the 8th consecutive NBA season, there won't be a repeat champ. The young San Antonio Spurs knocked off the defending champion Oklahoma City Thunder 111-103 in Game 7 of the Western Conference Finals May 30th. The Spurs applied their speed and athleticism to play quick in transition. They deflected passes and forced the Thunder into turnovers, and they ignited from three-point range to unseat Oklahoma City. Victor Wembanyama led the Spurs with 22 points, but this was a balanced effort, with 7 San Antonio players reaching double digits in scoring. And with that, the Spurs will face the New York Knickerbockers in the NBA Finals, which are scheduled to begin on Wednesday. So here's some takeaways from Game 7 of the Western Conference Finals. Victor Wembanyama played well, but the Spurs didn't need him to be historic. And that's a great sign for the Spurs. They didn't need an elite performance from Victor Wembanyama to unseat the defending champs in their own building. They just needed to play team basketball. That said, at times, Wembanyama has carried the Spurs. Game 7, he was just solid, finishing with 22 points on 7 of 15 shooting and adding 7 rebounds, 2 assists, 1 steal, and 1 block. He had to play discipline through some foul trouble, but this performance was more about San Antonio as a collective. 7 different players reached double digits in scoring, and role players carved out spaces to contribute. And Julian Champagnie, who finished with 20 points, dropped 11 in the third quarter. Backup center Luke Cornett, who played just 6 minutes and 6 seconds, hustled back during a pivotal Thunder fast break to pin a momentum-changing block against the backboards in an eventual 4-point swing. De'Aaron Fox was a menace on defense all night and collected 3 steals, later found a shooting stroke. Rookie Dylan Harper, a 20-year-old, knocked down huge shots during the stretch, scored 12 off the bench on 5 of 8 shooting. Wembanyama showed that he can take over games and elevate the Spurs into contenders. Teammates showed Saturday night that San Antonio can win even when Wembanyama is just solid. The biggest plays of the game might have been Luke Cornett's block, Spurs coach Mitch Johnson told reporters after the game. When you start peeling back the layers of how many minutes this guy got, or what the box score said, obviously we had a lot of guys step up and make shots tonight, which we needed with a variety of people that got double-digit points. But this was a team effort. Huge, huge moments. The Thunder couldn't make up for the absences of Jalen Williams and A.J. Mitchell. The Thunder will not admit this publicly, but they have a good excuse for dropping this series. Jalen Williams, the 2025 All-Star, played just 54 minutes as he battled hamstring injury. Backup guard A.J. Mitchell, with a right soleus strain, missed the final 4 games of the series. With those two gone for the most important part of the Western Conference Finals, the Oklahoma City offense couldn't recover. Problem is that both Williams and Mitchell are secondary creators and are players who can handle the ball. This takes the pressure off Julius Alexander, especially when opposing teams throw double teams at him. Yet with both out, the Spurs could devote their full attention to Julius Alexander, which led to moments of stagnation and turnovers. That was exacerbated when the Thunder role players couldn't hit open looks. Second chance points nearly saved the Thunder. There's one thing that sparked Oklahoma City's run in the second quarter was its work on the offensive glass. The Thunder gained a 9-4 edge on offensive rebounds the first half Saturday night. It was no surprise then that Oklahoma City took a massive 17-6 lead in second chance points into intermission. Offensive rebounding helped revive a moribund Thunder offense that fell into an easy early hole in the first quarter. The other thing offensive boards did for OKC was neutralize San Antonio's transition offense. The Spurs wanted to play quickly, and failing to scoop up defensive rebounds momentarily robbed the Spurs of chances to get out on the break. So did Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. A monster 13-point second quarter from Shai Gilgeous-Alexander lifted the Thunder back into the game. Gilgeous-Alexander admittedly was slow to start as the Spurs threw extra bodies at him anytime he got the ball in an attacking position, so some of the early issues were to be expected. But Julius Alexander was far more decisive in the second quarter and looked to get his looks before the Spurs were able to set their defense. At the half, Julius Alexander had 19 points and a wildly efficient 8 of 11 shooting, and had added 5 assists and 4 rebounds. His 19 points were most of the series during the first half. He looked like an elite player who knew what was at stake. The biggest issue was that Julius Alexander's supporting cast, by and large, let him down. Julius Alexander finished the game with 35 points on 12 of 21 shooting, 9 assists, 4 rebounds, 3 steals, and 1 blocked shot. The San Antonio offense to start the game was impressive. Their defense was even better. Early on in Game 7, the Spurs swarmed the ball, used active hands to deflect passes, and took control of the game with turnovers. San Antonio, though the first 6.45 minutes of the game, forced the Thunder into 5 turnovers on 5 steals, which led to a quick 7-0 advantage on points off turnovers. Of course, it helped the Spurs didn't commit a single turnover during that span early, but it was the force and intensity the Spurs brought that impacted the game. The Thunder were better with the ball in the second quarter, which allowed them to get better looks. For San Antonio to win this Game 7 and need to find a way to continue to pressure ball handlers into turnovers, because that's the recipe it can use to play with more tempo. The Thunder need a lot more from Chet Holmgren. He was overshadowed all through the series long, but Oklahoma City could not complete its comeback, in large part because Chet Holmgren did not provide more on either offense or defense. By the midway point of the third quarter, Holmgren had taken just 2 shot attempts, making 1 for 4 points. On the other end, he collected just 2 rebounds, 1 block, and 1 steal. He's a premier defender, but simply hadn't been able to protect the rim as well as he had points during the regular season. On offense, he hesitated far too much when he got the ball in his hands. His season ends after posting these stats in Game 7. 4 points, 1 of 2 shooting, 4 rebounds, 2 steals, and 2 blocks. Some of that's on me, Thunder coach Mark and Daniel said. Some of that's the way we approach the game. It's not all on him. Actually thought he played his minutes pretty well. Had runs at the end of the second quarter that got us back going, cut into the game. He was a huge part of that in ways that may not be in the box score. And lastly, the Spurs pick and roll with Wembanyama as a screener destroyed the Thunder in the third quarter. San Antonio went 16-2 run midway through the third quarter, and there was one offensive action the team turned to time and time again. Whether it was Aaron Fox or Stephon Castle handling the ball, Spurs used Wembanyama as a screener and then asked him to roll hard to the hoop. The attention taken to Wembanyama, requiring Thunder guards to leak into the paint to provide help defense, left 3-point shooter Julian Champagnie, who had 11 points in the quarter, wide open.
You are listening to a reading of today's USA Today on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. The time right now is 18 minutes after the hour. The next article is also from the sports section. The title is The Leader That We Want. It is submitted by Jacob Kamenker. Tim Ream, a 38-year-old defender who plays for Major League Soccer's Charlotte Football Club, will wear the captain's armband for the USA during the World Cup. Quote, "I'm so grateful that he is with us," Pochettino told reporters on May 30th. "He is a great captain, not only on the field, but more importantly off the field. He has the experience and capacity to be the leader that we want." Pochettino praised Ream for being a positive leader and expressed optimism about he would handle the role for the World Cup. Ream was then offered a chance to speak and thank Pochettino for entrusting him with the role. Quote, "This is more than a dream come true," Ream said. "I've done everything possible to be part of this group, to help this group along. I'm just really grateful to be sitting here to have this honor, and at the same time, it's not going to change what I do or who I am and how I help the group." Ream made his international debut for the US MNT in 2010, starting a game against South Africa in the Nelson Mandela Challenge Cup. He has appeared in 80 games for the US MNT since and played every minute of the squad's 4 matches in the Qatar World Cup in 2022. Ream has logged just one career international goal, which came against Puerto Rico in 2016. He has posted 4 assists across his international appearances to date. Ream has served as the US MNT's captain 26 times, which ranks 8th all-time in the squad's history, and is looking forward to assuming the mantle again during the 2026 World Cup. "It's the highest honor for me with this group and for the World Cup," Ream said. "I'm not going to take that for granted." Could find places to get touches, to train and to develop. That has been his lifetime love. I think when you look at anything really, life, school, sports, finances, family, you always have those people behind the scenes that are helping you out, Ream says. You don't get anywhere on your own, no matter what you're choosing or what your path or what your journey is. The familial introduction by your parents is important, but we all need somebody that isn't a parent, those other coaches and those other people in your life to believe in you and help you and push you to get where you necessarily don't see where you're going to end up. Ream, also with USMT teammates Tyler Adams and Matt Turner, are participating in New York Life in, quote, The Assistant, quote, a short-form documentary series that highlights the people and communities behind their journeys. According to a press statement shared with USA Today Sports, content from The Assist will continue to be released in the coming weeks. We caught up with Ream, a defender on Team USA and for Major League Soccer's Charlotte Football Club, who has played professionally, stateside, internationally, and since 2010, and Kalish, now St. Louis University's men's soccer head coach. They offer ways Ream's story can help younger athletes and their parents with perspective on their own development. Teach your young athletes to be individuals, but to know that they're not alone. Ream's earliest memories of his youth are with a ball at his feet. He's the oldest of 5. His 3 brothers and sisters all played various sports, but soccer was the common denominator, one ingrained within their city's deep connection to the sport. What kind of holds true with all St. Louis guys, it seems like, is they unbelievable teammates, recalls Kalish, who started watching Ream around the U14-15 level with the St. Louis Scott Gallagher Soccer Club. They're very humble and very hardworking. They're blue collar. The character piece of most St. Louis guys is the same. A lot of the guys over the years, you look at them, you say, great teammate, hardworking, great mentality, and a guy that you can go to war with, so to speak, and Tim definitely fits that mold. It was a mindset Ream established with the help of Kalish and Howe, a legendary figure within the city's youth soccer scene. Howe was demanding and fiery and had strong ideas about how you train and advance your career. Kalish was more laid back and technical. The coach describes his style as having a lot of love mixed with high standards in a very team and family-oriented environment. I think they taught us to be individuals, Ream says. It wasn't this kind of, oh, you have to play this way. It was, hey, we want to play this way, and this is how we're going to achieve it. But it's also kind of, hey, you guys need to go out and in the quiet moments and in the moments that no one is paying attention, and you have to do your own work. And so it didn't always feel like they were on top of you. It didn't always feel like, hey, you have to be doing this. You can't do it any other way. It was, well, here's a way to get from point A to point B. Now, guess what? There are different ways to get from point A to point B. There's so many different patterns and ways to do things. Develop a tolerance for mental adversity. Character development carries a lot of weight with coaches. Still, Howe had a general idea of the way he wanted things done, and he showed his temper when they didn't go as planned. I feel like in a way that helps you, Reams says, and especially as you get into the 14, 15, and 16 ages where you're starting to grow, you're starting to get into that late teens. How are you going to make it in the game? Him and Kevin were the first club coaches that really focused on us as individuals and as players. He truly looked at each individual and said, this is how we're going to get better. This is how we're going to practice. This is how we're going to train. This is what we need, and this is where Howe saw us going as people and as players. When he recruits players for college, Kalish loves to look inside kids and see their competitive makeup. It's very rare that a player doesn't have to go through some form of a setback and in which guys are going to throw in the towel, Kalish says. Which guys can stay grounded, keep controlling what they can control, keep moving forward, and then just win coaches over or wait their time until maybe a new coach comes in. Reams says your mental resiliency developed from dealing with setbacks can determine whether you have a soccer career beyond college. For example, when he was about 14, he ruptured his quad, which knocked him out for about a half a year. At the time, it feels like the end of the world, he says. You're going through rehab, you're seeing different doctors and potentially surgeons, and you think my soccer playing is done. Having the team, Tommy, having Kevin, I was able to go and just be part of training and still be there and still feel like I was part of the team. You're getting knocked down and you're having people who are picking you up. You need those people around you to say, hey, listen, it's going to be fine. You can't train, but at least you can be around the guys. At least you can hear the communication. You can feel their energy, feel the vibe of the group. When you're out, you get such a better understanding of the whys and of what you're doing and what they're training. Finding a coaching environment best for you, not everyone else. Howe and Kalish made training fun in those St. Louis warehouses. They played games where everyone got touches, everyone was engaged and stayed focused. It made Ream want to play more and more. He played basketball until his junior year at St. Dominic High in O'Fallon, Missouri, as well as on the school's soccer team in the days before academies started draining players from high school teams. But Ream made soccer work as part of his life throughout the year, thanks in part to the environment his club coaches created. Kalish still thinks there is a place for high school soccer even on an elite player's ladder. I think there's a lot to be said for playing within your community, Kalish says. It's not right for everyone, but it can be right for a lot of players. There's a lot more to being a well-rounded person than just juggling a soccer ball or whatnot. The support structure that they have, the coaching staff, the environment that these coaches are created, those things to me are what's really going to drive development more than anything. The character development piece is something that I think is just so vital, and I think we saw a lot of that throughout those years. When Tim was coming up, it was old school in some ways, and I think there's a lot to be said for that. Play the long game even when you reach high school or college. In Howe and Kalish, Ream saw coaches who knew when to push him, but also knew when to take a step back and put their arm around him. They knew what buttons to press to get the best out of you. It's every coach's job, really. You have so many instances where coaches can ruin sports for kids, Ream says. You have so many instances where parents can ruin sports for kids, and that could be the parents of their own child or parents on the sidelines and doing and saying whatever they're saying. That takes the fun out of it for other kids. I play because it's fun for me. I don't play for the money, but I play for the people who have helped me, the people who have put in their time and their effort. I owe it to them to play as long as possible can because they're just as much part of this. When Kalish watched Reem as he was coming up, he was always one of the top players in the age group, but he really started to separate himself from his peers in his junior and senior year in high school. Tim wasn't the one that you would have ideally picked out right away as a high school player or even a college player, Kalish says. He was a little bit more of a late developer. In his game intelligence, his decision-making, his technique, his composure, those things you learn to appreciate over time. But he wasn't like the biggest, strongest, fastest guy that always stood out in every match. But he was a guy that once you worked with, you realized his value was through his consistency, through the rigor and discipline of doing things right over and over and over again. But I think he would even tell you he wasn't like the star during his high school years. We can always get better if we love what we're doing. And when we do that, as Kalish says, we are playing the long game. He didn't worry about who was getting the most accolades or if he was the high school player of the year, Kalish says. You got the same guy every single time he showed up at training and games. He was like Mr. Consistent. And I think because he was that way, it's prepared him really well to have success in college and then obviously in the professional game and to be able to deal with all the hard things that goes along with being a professional athlete. You get what you earn, and sometimes you have to struggle. Kalish says if players can create an environment like Reem did, where they keep getting better, quote, the coaches will find you if you're going to be good enough. Reem was an attacking left back as a youth player. He played a little bit of center midfield in college and then center back later in his career, even as a professional in Major League Soccer and in England. He's always been a well-rounded player, but Kalish says his superpower, which he has had since he was a young player, is his calmness and composure on the ball. It's kind of similar to a left-handed pitcher, he says. When he strikes a ball with his left foot, there's a crispness to that unique. Playing the long game, Reem's former youth coach says, means trusting that doing the right things over and over will work out for you in the end. My father was an electrician, Kalish says. My mom was a receptionist, really middle-class family. I think the messaging that held true throughout all my years was you get what you earn, and the coach is always right in the sense of like. You have to work through your issues and don't come complain to me about something. You talk to your coach, and it was very much, that's life. Life isn't always fair in some ways, and you got to just grow up and deal with it and manage through it, and we'll support you through it, but this is part of it. Reem knew he could lean on his coaches. Now he leans on his wife, Kristen Sapienza, who played soccer at St. Louis University like he did. They have 3 kids, Aiden, 12, Theodore, 10, and Lilia, 7. She understands all in the field, and she knows what that means, Reem says. Having someone that you can come home to and bounce everything off is so important. It allows you not to just be on your own. Those quiet moments can be important, but they also don't have to be alone. And finally, she connects all of us. She keeps us connected even when I'm thousands of miles away. I'm able to keep in touch on how the boys are doing in swimming and how my daughter's doing in her soccer games. It allows me to feel like I'm not so far away in those moments. Quote, everyone sees the bright lights in what we do, but there's so many people in the background that have helped all of us in every walk of life, and those are the people that don't get highlighted.
You're listening to a reading of today's USA Today and the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. The time is 34 minutes after the hour. We now turn to the entertainment section of USA Today. And our first article is titled, I can find it here. Says, well, let me go to this article. Springsteen still stokes fire in the rain in D.C. The author is Melissa Rigoriri. Dateline Washington. At the tour opener in Minneapolis, Bruce Springsteen fans were steeped in fire. 2 months later, what was supposed to be the exclamation point to this 20-day tour in Washington, D.C., they were baptized by rain. Maybe this hastily arranged, deeply intentional Land of Hope and Dreams American tour didn't bookend the way Springsteen had planned, thanks to a playoff-related postponement in Philadelphia, where the tour was scheduled to wrap up on May 30th. In the steady rain that fell on the tens of thousands packing Nationals Park, the only stadium show of the tour located 4 miles from the White House, could have been a hindrance to lesser artists. But through logistic hiccups, death threats that guitarist Steve Van Zandt recently disclosed, hearing from the disgruntled minority who somehow didn't realize that a tour conceived as a political summons of resistance was political, Springsteen, age 76, and the mighty E Street Band remained steadfast in their purpose. His potent sermon that opens the concert, prayers for the military, unbridled vitriol for the Trump administration, before the band slams into Edwin Starr's War, was delivered with fist punching the air and eyes scrunching with conviction. The pointed songs that dotted the nearly 3-hour show, including Death to My Hometown, accented by Susie Tyrrell's sawing fiddle, and the defiant No Surrender, with Springsteen emphasizing there's a war outside raging lyric, took fans on a journey. Throughout the tour, Springsteen setlist barely wavered, aside from a feverish cover of the Clash's Clamptown, handled primarily by guitarist guest Tom Morello, which was added by the third show, while Sweet Baby Jean was ditched by the fourth. One of the most compelling moments during the May 27th D.C. date came during Streets of Minneapolis, the plain-spoke ballad of sorrow and hope for the city swarmed by federal agents earlier this year, hence his position at the tour opener in late March. As Springsteen sang of Minneapolis resident Renee Good and Alex Preddy, civilians shot and killed by immigration and customs enforcement officers while protesting, rain fell in sheets and infused the song with a prayer-like feel. Fans joined Springsteen's chant of "Ice Out Now" with full-throated fervor while he implored, "Let them hear you at the," expletive, "White House." But along with the pain came joy as Springsteen, a sharp-dressed man in a white dress shirt, dark vest, and tie, ambled down the catwalk like a kid gleefully playing in the sprinklers. The crowd marinated in the elation etched on Springsteen's face as he slapped dabbed hands and locked eyes with fans during Hungry Heart and strode through the promised land. At the song's end, he reached over heads to hand his harmonica, a young man whose overwhelmed reaction could have cured ills of the world. Springsteen's gift for galvanizing is undiminished, and this tour's effect on fans was displayed by the thousands who held their hands up in a "don't shoot" pose throughout American Skin, 41 shots, and reveled in the revival spirit of My City in Ruins, which Springsteen prefaced by saying, "Truth, honesty, and decency. Don't let anybody tell you these things don't matter. They do." Longtime Springsteen fan and noted author James Grady alternately wept and smiled broadly as he stood in his rain poncho. Bruce is the great American author of my generation, stepping up when we needed him most, Grady said. And Springsteen isn't done yet. Toward the end of the show, he announced the Power to the People Festival, which will take place October 3rd at Merriweather Post Pavilion outside of D.C., with performances from Morello, Foo Fighters, David Matthews, Joan Baez, Brittany Howard, Dropkick Murphys, Jack Black, Serge Tankian, Cypress Hill, Killer Mike, the Linda Lindas, and the man himself. Pre-sale is scheduled to begin May 29th, and general sales began May 30th. The fire, it seems, is still raging.
The next article is also from the Life section. It's a streaming preview. The title of this article is Second, quote, Seasons, unquote, Shifts into New Gear. Pack your baggage, both emotional and practical, because, quote, the Four Seasons, unquote, is back for another vacation. Well, 4 of them, and you might actually enjoy them this time. Netflix drama about 3 couples who take quarterly vacations had a shaky first season in 2025, despite an A-list cast that included co-creator Tina Fey, Steve Carell, Will Forte, and Oscar nominee Coleman Domingo. There was a lethargy to the series which focused mostly on Carell's character, Nicky, leaving his wife of many years, and Carrie Kennel Silver, Reno 911, for a much younger woman, Ginny, Erica Hennigan. But a late-breaking twist may have set the second season, streaming now on Netflix, free from its wishy-washy roots. Carol's Nick, spoiler alert, dies at the end of the season 1, and a second season without him feels fresher, faster, brighter, and more complex than the first. He may have been the engine on which the plot turned in season 1, but he also was kind of a downer. All his contributions to the story had a tinge of negativity and odiousness that was hard to shake in his scenes, even as Nick worked to redeem himself near the end of the season. Season 2 is liberated by his absence. There is plenty of awkward conflict, of course. That's the whole point of the seasons. A show meant to mine dark comedy from the depths of long-term relationships, just as in the 1981 Alan Alda and Carol Burnett film from which the series takes its inspiration. But if they couples aren't fighting, they're just watching an Instagram reel of Gen Xers on expensive trips. Yet out of Nick's shadow, the cast gets to let their freak flags fly, so to speak, and the argument feels a little less bitter and fatigued. The show picks up 9 or so months after Nick's death, when the gang has gotten back together to spread his ashes at the top of a scenic mountainscape. There's cynic Kate, Faye, and her golden retriever husband Jack, Forte, even more cynical and gossipy Danny, Domingo, and his urbane husband Claude, Marco Calvini, Nick's aggrieved ex-wife Anne, and his very pregnant girlfriend Ginny. Everyone seems like they're part of a happy but dysfunctional family, just like last time, but the cracks start to show quite quickly, just as like last time, and that's just the springing tip. Much of the story is driven by Anne and Ginny's complicated and fractious relationship, even made more fraught by the elephant in the room of Nick's estate and a new baby on the way. The 2 actresses, cast in roles often reduced to stale tropes in other media, the angry ex-wife, the hot new girlfriend, help round out their characters to something more. Ginny, in particular, grows from last season and over the course of the season changes from a punchline to a real member of the group. The new episodes leave room for seriousness and depth amid hijinks and naked murderers on the loose, seriously. Jack is struggling to manage his grief over Nick's death. Ginny is terrified by single motherhood. Danny is wondering if he should be a father, and Anne is going through a thinly veiled midlife crisis. There are few series in TV that deal with this period of adulthood, not quite young, not quite old, with such nuance. After its shocker ending and its lackluster episodes, it didn't seem like Seasons was a show that really had to come back for more. But it's a good reminder that everybody can learn and do better, even in a TV show. And finally, it's a season of growth all around.
Here's a movie review. U2 leaps to backroom hit. The author is Brendan Morrow. Ready to feel old? The filmmaker behind summer's hottest horror movie was born in 2005 and can't legally drink. Kane Parson, the 20-year-old YouTuber who has turned his hugely popular web series into a movie, Backrooms, playing in theaters now, is the youngest director in A24 history. He was still a teen when he got the gig, and the day he pitched the movie to the indie studio, his college applications were due. Making the film all ended up being great and really fun and easy, he says. But initially it was just like, this doesn't happen. This has not happened. There's not really a thing to compare to this. This is very strange. Everything's going to be like, this is a child, this is an infant. Backroom stars Chiwetel Ejiofor as Clark, an isolated, bitter man living in the furniture store he owns after a messy divorce. One night he's making a baffling discovery in the basement, a doorway that leads to an infinite maze of mostly empty rooms with inexplicable contents. There's a stop sign in the middle of a room, a hole filled with chairs and so forth, as if the environment was randomly generated. Clark becomes obsessed with exploring this other dimension known as the back rooms. When he doesn't come out, his therapist, Mary, played by Renee Reinsve, heads inside to search for him. Though the movie is based on Parsons' YouTube series of the same name, which collectively has drawn about 200 million views, the core idea didn't originate with him. It came from, of all places, the anonymous image board 4chan, where a user in 2019 posted a photo of an empty room with yellow wallpaper and carpeting as an example of a disquieting image that just feels off. In a comment, someone else imagines the photo depicted a realm the user dubbed the back rooms. If you're not careful and you no-clip out of reality in the wrong areas, you'll end up in the back rooms, the person wrote, with no clipping referring to a player glitching through the environment in a video game. The comment took off and became popular creepypasta, or a spooky story spread online. Enter Parsons, who saw the original 4chan thread and was intrigued by how it gave everybody the same eerie feeling. I find it very compelling that so many people felt so strongly that there was this thing they could not quite articulate, and so that meant there was a string to pull on, he says. So in January 2022, Parsons uploaded a 9-minute found footage style short to YouTube, which a person wanders through the back rooms and encounters a mysterious creature. The bone-chilling video looks as if it's been shot in an actual environment, but Parsons created it with his hand-me-down laptop using Blender, a free graphics software. By that point, Parsons had been making shorts as a hobby for years. He began taking it more seriously in middle school after illegally downloading visual effects software, teaching himself how to use it. I just started spending 100% of my time that was not in school making the shorts, he said. Though he had success with some earlier YouTube videos, Parsons' first backroom short was a hit on a whole other level. It amassed a staggering 78 million views. That led him to create more than 20 additional videos, building out an elaborate mythology. Producers began reaching out within a month of the original video. Still a 16-year-old high school junior, Parsons was intrigued, but he was skeptical and very paranoid about getting Hollywood involved in his creation. "I didn't want this thing to get away from me," he said. "I didn't want that project I was very excited to continue building to get stifled by suits with a chainsaw." Being thrust into meetings with big shots might sound like a lot for a teenager, but Parsons wasn't awed by the Hollywood magic, partly because he didn't worship or observe the industry too heavily when he was growing up. He cites a pair of video games rather than movies as his main creative touchstones. "My biggest properties growing up were Half-Life and Portal," he said. "Those formed much of my sensibilities when I was a kid, and they've trickled down to everything I've done." In the end, Parsons, who scrapped plans to attend film school so he could go all in on Back Rooms, was able to make a movie very much in keeping with his web series and its lore, with a more traditional narrative and physical sets, 30,000 square feet of them. When he started directing, his fear of being looked at as a child turned out to be unfounded. "Didn't happen once," he said. Parsons is a prime example of how YouTube has made information about filmmaking available to all, and he originally was inspired by watching other online creators. All these YouTubers were very much putting on an emphasis on how accessible these tools are, and so it felt very encouraging to go try it out myself, he says. Any questions I had were all answered by YouTube or other online tutorials. Based on early box office tracking, Backrooms poised to be a hit. It looks to sell open north of $40 million, 4 times the film's reported budget of about $10 million, according to Variety. That level of success could usher in an age of movies based not on comic books or 1980 cartoons, but on IP more relevant to a younger audience, content that originated online. It's also sure to establish a major new talent in Parsons, who's eyeing more dynamic, complex set pieces for whatever his next film might be, without abandoning the weirdness of his debut. And in conclusion, "I don't love casting a wide net to appeal to as many people as possible," Parsons said. "I like having a very specific thread to follow. Sometimes, if it takes me to a slightly more esoteric place, I'm fine with that. Like the Back Rooms, his future is full of infinite possibilities."
And finally, from the Life feature, it's your birthday. Who's celebrating today? Actor Pat Boone is 92. Morgan Freeman is 89. Linda Scott's 81. Ronnie Wood from the Stones is 79. Charlene is 76. And Alan Wilder from the Depeche Mode is 67. Bassist Simon Gallup from The Cure is 66. Model TV host Heidi Klum is 53. Singer-songwriter Alanis Morissette is 52. And actor Tom Holland is 30. You've been listening to a reading of USA Today for June 1st. We read USA Today weekday at noon. For more information, call 716-821-5555. Your readers today have been David Hayes and
Tom Scanlon.
Welcome summer with your Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. We're planning a summer bash bigger and better than ever before. It's Friday, June 26th at Creekside Banquet Facility in Grove, located at the corner of Union Road and William Street in Cheektowaga. You're invited to enjoy a buffet chicken and pasta dinner, your first drink on us, a basket raffle, and Buffalo Music Hall of Fame party band The Boys of Summer from 6 to 9 p.m. Tickets are $50 and support the 160 volunteers who read all the programming offered by Radio Reading. That's Friday, June 26th from 6 to 9 p.m. at Creekside Banquet Facility in Grove in Cheektowaga. Get your tickets now by calling 716-821-5555 extension 3 or online at nfradioreading.org. Thank you to New Era Kep Foundation, Tyverin Law, and Perry's Ice Cream for sponsoring this largest event of the year.
Coming up next in the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service, we got episode number 6 of 1929 by Andrew Ross Sorkin. Following that, at 3 o'clock is Smithsonian Magazine, and at 4 o'clock is a re-airing of today's Buffalo News. Stay with us. vision or have another print disability,